Hi, I want to talk to you today about rounding. I know that during the school year we had some problems with it, so I just wanted to review rounding. And I found a little saying that might help us remember how to round. So it says rounding. The first thing we do is we find the place. Look next door. If it's 5 or bigger, add one more. If it's 4 or less, let it rest. And everything after that number, rounded number, changes to 0. You might be thinking, what does that mean? So let me show you what I'm talking about. So let's say that I have the number 23. And I want to round 23 to the nearest 10. So I'm looking at the tens place. So I'm going to circle the 2. I'm looking in the tens place. So that's find the place. Then we are to look next door. It is a 3. Next door is a 3. So the next part is if it's 5 or more, we add one more. 3 is not bigger than 5. So then it says if it's 4 or less, we let it rest. So that we're going to keep the 2, and then everything after is a 0. So 23 would be rounded to 20. Let me show you another one. Let's say I have 38. And again, I want to round it to the nearest 10. So I'm looking at the tens place. I circle the 3. The 3 is in the tens place. Then I look next door, which is an 8. The saying says if it's 5 or bigger, add one more. 8 is bigger than 5, so I'm going to add one more. So I'm going to change that 3 to a 4, and everything after is a 0. So I will add a 0 to it. So 38 rounded to the nearest 10 is 40. Let's try the number 14. So again, I'm wanting to round to the nearest 10. So I look at the tens place, it's a 1. I look next door. If it's a 4, the saying says 5 or bigger, add one more. 4 or less, let it rest. It's a 4, so I'm going to keep the 1, and everything after is 0. So 14 rounded to the nearest 10 is 10. Now, the same thing can go for rounding to the nearest 100. So if I want to round my number to the nearest 100, let's say I have the number 134. And again, I want to round to the nearest 100. So I'm looking at the place that I want to round to. So that means I'm looking at the 100s place. And in the 100s place, we have a 1. So I look next door. If it's 5 or bigger, add one more. If it's 4 or less, let it rest. It's 4 or less, so I'm going to let it rest. So I'm going to keep the 1, and everything after is a 0. So 134 rounded to the nearest 100 is 100. Let's try the number 667. 667. Again, I want to round to the nearest 100, so I'm going to circle the hundreds place, which is a 6. I look next door. It's a 6. The saying says 5 or bigger, add one more. 4 or less, let it rest. 6 is bigger, so I'm going to add one more. So I'm going to take that 6 and make it a 7, and everything after that number is a 0. So 667 would be rounded to 700. That is rounding to the nearest 10 and to the nearest 100. And hopefully that phrase, find the place, look next door, 5 or bigger, add one more. 4 or less, let it rest. Everything after the rounded number changes to 0.